everyone. I just want to start by apologizing for the delay. We are having some technical issues today, so we're trusting that these are now resolved, so we're ready to start the webinar. So thank you for taking the time to join us. As the title implies, this webinar has been specifically designed for new registrants, those who registered for the first time in 2020. And it addresses many of the common inquiries that we receive. In terms of your presenters today, my name is Adrienne Foley. I'm the Coordinator of Communication and Administration with the Newfoundland and Labrador College of Social Workers. And joining me today is Annette Johns, who is Associate Director of Policy and Practice with the NLCSW.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Some housekeeping items. This webinar is 1 Cpe credit under the required workshop category. At any time throughout the webinar, please feel free to submit your questions through the Q&A section, and we'll spend some time at the end reviewing those. So in terms of today's agenda, we're going to provide an overview of who we are. We're going to explain what registration means and the corresponding legislation. We're going to look at the diversity that's within the social work profession. We're going to delve into the Cpe policy and the annual renewal process. And finally, we'll explore the practice resources that should be part of your social work toolkit. So in terms of who we are, as most of you know, on September 30th, 2020, the Newfoundland and Labrador Association of Social Workers became the Newfoundland and Labrador College of Social Workers. Although our name changed, our mandate did not. We remain committed to advancing and promoting ethical and professional social work practice in the public interest. And how do we do this? By regulating the practice of social work, by advancing excellence in the practice of social work, and by promoting the profession. So if we look at the objectives under the regulation goal, they include to provide an effective registration process through continuous quality improvement. Our registration process is continually being evaluated. In 2017, for example, we introduced online registration and renewal. And since that time, new features such as the Update My Cpe have been added. And we'll get into that feature as part of this webinar. Provide a fair and transparent professional conduct review process. Although the numbers are small, generally less than 1% of our total membership are part of this process in a given registration year, it is important that the process be fair and transparent. And this process is covered in detail under the regulation menu on our website. Advance a quality assurance program in accordance with the legislation. The amended Social Workers Act containing QA provisions came into effect in January of 2020, which resulted in the establishment of a QA program. So our QA program includes a QA committee, which can receive allegations that do not meet the threshold for professional conduct review. It also includes mandatory Cpe, which really serves to formalize our long-standing Cpe policy. And finally, a duty to report conduct deserving of sanction. If we look at the last objective under regulation, to provide leadership and collaboration towards excellence in professional regulation provincially, nationally, and internationally. NLCSW works collaboratively with various groups, including the Canadian Council of Social Work Regulators, the Association of Social Work Boards, and provincially with other regulated professions through the Health Regulators Network. So I'm now going to hand it over to Annette, who's going to discuss the practice and promotion goals.
Thank you, Adrienne. So as you'll see on your screen there, in terms of practice, the objective there is to advance excellence in the practice of social work. So NLCSW develops and produces practice resources to inform social work practice and provide guidance to members. And we're going to provide an overview of those resources later in the presentation. We foster the continuing competency of social workers through CE offerings throughout the year. These sessions and webinars not only provide valuable CE learning for members, but also promotes the knowledge, skills, and expertise of social workers who are involved in the delivery of these education sessions. Just to give you an example, in 2019-2020 registration year, the NLCSW provided 21 hours of CPE under our required category of workshops. Staff at the NLCSW also provide ethical consultations for members, of which I am the staff lead. Members can also request an ethical consultation from the NLCSW Ethics Committee. Ethical consultations touch on topics such as conflicts of interest, informed consent, boundaries and dual relationships, confidentiality and disclosure of client information, and electronic practice. In relation to the social policy objective, NLCSW engages in opportunities to inform and advance social policies. We participate in the provincial pre-budget consultation process annually, of which all of NLCSW's written submissions can be found on our website, and we respond to consultation opportunities that may happen throughout the year to inform policies related to issues such as poverty reduction, minimum wage, and services to seniors as examples. Under the promotion, we have as the objective to promote the profession of social work. And this really happens in a variety of ways. We publish a newsletter, a magazine called Connecting Voices twice a year in January and July, and that is an opportunity to promote the knowledge and expertise of social workers from across Newfoundland and Labrador. And articles in that publication cover ethics, social work regulation, practice, social issues, theory and approaches to practice, and so on. The NLCSW Promotion Committee continues to expand our Did You Know information series to highlight the role of social work in diverse areas of practice. And to date, 27 Did You Know fact sheets have been created and cover areas such as acute care, eating disorders, mental health and addictions, newcomers to Canada, oncology, palliative care, work with children and adolescents, recreation, seniors, and the list goes on. So there's 27 of those that you'll find on the website. We also have a Twitter account that will provide you at the end that we continue to engage not only social workers but other professions and the public. And as an organization, we do engage with stakeholders and participate in groups such as Food First, the Newfoundland and Labrador Public Health Association, and End Homelessness St. John's as some examples. Two initiatives that we do throughout the year as well is the offering of some awards. So we have two awards that we give a member annually, one being the CSW Distinguished Service Award, which is given to a member here in the province annually, and our NLCSW Pride in the Profession Award. And you can certainly read more about those awards on the NLCSW website.
So now we're going to move on to the registration part of the agenda. So social work in Newfoundland and Labrador is regulated under provincial legislation called the Social Workers Act. Registration with the NLCSW grants the registered social worker RSW designation, and that is required to use the title social worker or to practice within the scope of the social work profession as defined in the Act. So as new registrants, you should have received by now a certificate of registration in the mail that would have been part of your new members kit. We really encourage all registrants to proudly display this certificate because the certificate assures the public that you have the specialized knowledge and skills to practice social work in this province. And finally, through registration with the NLCSW, you also become automatically affiliated with the Canadian Association of Social Workers. The CASW is comprised of 9 provincial and territorial partner organizations, which includes the NLCSW. So what you'll see now is the first in our series of polling questions that are included throughout the webinar. So we just ask those in attendance to consider and answer the following question. How many RSWs are in Newfoundland and Labrador? So the options are 1,000, 1,300, or 1,600. And we'll give you a moment to answer. So it's interesting in terms of the results that we're seeing there. It's about 50-50 between, it seems like 1,300 is coming in the lead there. We got about 80% or so.
It's changing because people are still putting information in.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it looks like 1,300, about 71% are saying 1,300, and a bit, about 38% or so are saying 1,600. So actually, the answer is 1,600. Social work is actually one of the largest health professions in Newfoundland and Labrador, and it is a very diverse profession. We have social workers practicing in hospitals, seniors' homes, adult and youth corrections, child welfare, addictions, mental health, and that's just to name a few practice areas. In relation to the social work profession in Newfoundland and Labrador, one of the statements that we often hear is, I'm working but not in a social work position. So what we wanted to do was highlight that this statement reflects a common misconception, that a position needs to be titled social worker to be considered employed in social work. We always encourage registrants to reflect on the question, are you using your social work knowledge, skills, and abilities in the position? If the answer is yes, then you are employed in social work, regardless of what your title is. So employed in social work means that registration is maintained. For those that don't maintain registration, there are re-entry to practice provisions in place to ensure continued competency to practice. These provisions, which were introduced in 2018, require the completion of the Association of Social Work Boards exam as a condition for registration. And this will be a condition of registration for applicants who have been previously registered as a social worker, but let their registration lapse for 3 years or more. And it's also a requirement for applicants who have graduated from an accredited social work program more than 3 years ago, but have never been registered. So now we're going to get into the continuing professional education, the Cpe piece of the agenda. So the NLCSW has had a policy on the submission of credit since the mid-1990s. And this is consistent with all regulated professions, as we all have the commitment to lifelong learning, remaining current, and offering the highest quality of professional service. And the requirement for Cpe is actually embedded in the CASW Code of Ethics, and will be considered part of your commitment to the individuals, the families, the groups, and communities that you serve, whether that be in direct practice, policy, management, or research. So the policy itself is overseen by the NLCSW Registration Committee, and it is reviewed annually to make sure it's clear and reflects practice. And the full policy is accessible under the CE menu on our website. So the Cpe policy itself was designed to cover a broad range of activities and to provide members with flexibility in meeting the annual Cpe requirement. As the policy is expansive, there can be a degree of professional judgment involved when you're determining if and where an event fits under the policy. We have, however, accredited a number of CSSD training modules, and that's more for consistency and clarity for social workers who are employed in that area of practice. And that accreditation information is also available under the CE menu on our website. So the policy itself is divided into two main categories. required, and elective. And we're going to delve into this more as part of the next slide. So annually, the minimum requirement is 40 credits, of which at least 20 must come from the required category. The hours that are accumulated over the course of the registration year are submitted as part of the online renewal process. So for example, as part of 2020 or 2021 renewal, you would submit credits accumulated during the 2020 registration year. So NLCSW's Registration Committee does conduct an annual Cpe audit each year as part of annual renewal. Social workers that are selected to participate in the audit are notified by email at the time of reg renewal and are required to submit additional Cpe details, including completion dates, event titles, descriptions. So the Cpe hours and the audits would all be submitted through the online registration system as part of the Cpe step. We do encourage all social workers to use what I referred to earlier as the Update My Cpe feature. That's available through the online system, and basically it allows you to track the credits that are completed during the registration year, so including the event date, the title, the number of hours, and the category that it falls under. And by doing that throughout the year, it will really help to streamline the annual renewal process. So we're just going to look a bit more now at the required versus the elective categories. So required credits, they're related to the practice of social work. They include transferable skills and learning. So for example, if you look in the Cpe policy itself, you will see detailed definitions for what falls under this category. And that includes workshops, conferences, courses. Now, if we compare that to the elective categories, they tend to be more informal, more flexible, more specific to one's position. So examples under elective, like we have a self-directed learning category. So that would include reading academic articles related to social work practice. We have an in-service training category. So that would involve training that's specific to your position. So a lot of times we do get asked, like, so what would be the main distinction between required versus elective? So it's important to consider, one, if it's enhancing your social work skills, and two, if it's transferable across the profession. So if the answer to both is yes, it would tend to fall under required. And all Cpe that's offered by the NLCSW does fall under the required workshop category. So let's consider some concrete examples. Mental health first aid training, that will be considered required, while CPR first aid will be considered elective. If you have training on new legislation, that will be considered required, while training for a new computer program that you might use at work or maybe workload measurement, that will be considered elective. So the CE menu on our website also has information regarding sources of Cpe as well as funding opportunities. The events page, for example, is a sub-menu that's located under the CE main menu, and it contains an events calendar which has upcoming events that's offered by both us and other organizations. There's also archived webinars there that are available for viewing through our YouTube channel. And once viewed, these can be claimed as required credits. And also on this page, you'll find links to other valuable sources of Cpe, including the Association of Social Work Boards, Crisis Trauma and Resource Institute, just to name a few examples. Another submenu is Cpe Funding. So although the majority of CE is now happening online due to COVID restrictions, there can still be some associated costs, so we wanted to let you know about the funding that is available. The NLCSW Professional Development Fund provides up to $200 for current members to attend CPE events that comply with the CPE policy. And draws take place twice per year in March and September. And the Canadian Association of Social Workers, so the CASW, with professional liability insurance provider BMS, also offers scholarships to assist social workers to attend educational events. Depending on the pool of applicants, one scholarship valued at $1,500 or two scholarships valued at $750 each are awarded to eligible applicants in September each year. And that scholarship for Newfoundland is administered by the NLCSW. So the full eligibility criteria and applications, they are available on our website. So now we're going to have our second polling question. So we're asking, if you completed your BSW in 2020, can the courses completed as part of the BSW degree be claimed as CPE credits? Yes or no? So just give you a moment to answer. We're just waiting for the responses there. And it looks like at this point that the majority are saying no, which is in fact correct. So courses completed as part of the BSW degree cannot be claimed as CPE, as completion of the degree is required as the baseline for registration. So now we're going to look at the annual renewal process, which will be coming up in January of 2021. So for current registrants, what will happen is that you'll be notified by email in mid-January when online renewal is open. So for this reason, it's very important to keep your email updated with our office. So what will happen at that time, once you get the email that online renewal is open, you would log into mynlsw.ca using your 4-digit registration number and password. And just to highlight in terms of the mynlsw.ca link, so although our name has changed, we don't anticipate that the name change will be reflected as part of our online system for 2021 renewal. So in all likelihood, you will still be renewing at mynlsw.ca and not mynlcsw.ca. But obviously, if that changes, we would certainly let you know. And the online system does provide an option for you to specify your own password, because I know that the ones that are automatically generated can be quite complex. So as part of the online renewal process, the main difference that you're going to notice between online renewal and when you applied initially is basically the CPE step with renewal. So you would submit CPE credits as part of the online renewal process. And as I mentioned before, if you use the Update My Cpe feature, it does help to streamline the submission of CPE credits as part of renewal, because basically on the CPE step, you'll see a transfer button there. So if you've been using the Update My Cpe feature throughout the year, then you'll be able to click the transfer button and transfer over the information that's been recorded under this feature directly to the CPE step. And finally, just to highlight in terms of the deadline, so the renewal deadline is always February 15th, midnight Island time. And this basically gives us time to process renewals before the final legislative deadline, which comes from the Social Workers Act of February 28th. There is a late fee, so a $50 late fee is applied after February 15th, and there's an additional $50 late fee applied after February 28th. So as February 28th is the legislative deadline, this means that you need to be registered by this date in order to go to work come March 1st. So now I'm going to hand it over to Annette, who's going to explore the practice resources that we offer.
Okay, thank you so much, Adrienne. So as noted at the beginning, NLCSW does develop a lot of practice resources for members, and we feel that ongoing communication about these practice resources is very important. Every month, the NLCSW sends members an electronic update, and this update contains information on the activities of the NLCSW, important information for members to be aware of, and information on any new practice resources that have been produced. And today we just want to give you a cumulative picture of the scope of resources that you can access as an RSW. So as you'll see on this slide, what we did was we developed a visual of what's called a social work toolkit. And the toolkit contains information related to the standards of practice for the profession, explanatory documents, guideline documents, and interpretive documents. So you can read through the listing of those documents, and we want to have a visual that will give you an overview of how these resources have been categorized. Each resource that is developed is in keeping with the CASW Code of Ethics and Standards of Practice for Social Workers, Newfoundland and Labrador, and grounded in best practices. And the topics that are generated for a lot of these documents come from ethical consultations that we do and conversations and discussions that we have with social workers throughout the province. And I'll just give you one example underneath the guideline documents. For example, in 2016, we produced a guideline document for social workers pertaining to medical assistance in dying and what social workers needed to know. And we also have information related to social work and decision-specific capacity assessments, for example. Under interpretive documents, we also have resources that include documents such as the self-assessment tools for informed consent and documentation. And that resource was developed by the NLCSW Ethics Committee to support practice and provide tools that social workers could use to reflect on and evaluate their documentation and informed consent practices, which are so critical to social work, to us as social workers. So all those resources can be found on the NLCSW website. Some are under practice resources and some are under practice documents or standards. So you'll find all those on the website. So I encourage you to check out those and read through them. So now we have another polling question that we would like for you to take part in. And it states, in addition to the CASW Code of Ethics, social workers in NL must be familiar with and adhere to the standards of practice. So your options there would be yes, no, or unsure. So I'll just give you a few minutes to give your answers there, and then we'll look at the results. Okay, that's great. We had 100% say yes, so that's fabulous. So, because you would have gotten those standards in your welcome kit when you registered with NLCSW. And the standards of practice is a regulatory document, and social workers must be familiar with and adhere to these standards. And as you can see from the slide, the standards address many areas, including registration, competence, informed consent, interjurisdictional practice, termination of the professional relationship, culture and diversity, private practice, etc. And as social workers, it's important that we know and understand these standards and how they are applied to our own practice. So if you haven't already done so, I encourage you to look through that document and really consider the standards within your current area of practice. So here's one example of a standard from the standards of practice. Some of the ethical dilemmas social workers face in practice include situations where a client may send them a Facebook friend request or reach out to them on a social media platform. And other times when the social worker considers searching out client information using social media. So in addition to the Code of Ethics, social workers can review the standards of practice to inform their decision making, And as you recall from the previous slide, the explanatory documents can be very useful there as well, because we do have an explanatory document on standards for technology use in social work practice. Other standards within the main standards of practice that would inform decision-making for these types of dilemmas would include informed consent, dual or multiple relationships, conflicts of interest, ethical decision-making, and documentation and recording. And we also have a wealth of practice resources on the website that you might tap into. For example, we have Practice Matters publication that explores and looks into social media and e-professionalism. We were also we also took a lead role in the development of the CASW document on social media and social work practice. And we participated in the International Task Force of the Association of Social Work Boards to develop model regulatory standards for technology use in social work practice. And all these documents can also be accessed on the NLCSW website. So, next polling question, practice scenario. You are it's not a polling question, sorry. To practice scenario, you are working with clients from diverse cultural backgrounds. What NLCSW resource can you access to help guide your practice? So that would be the Standards for Cultural Competence in Social Work Practice explanatory document. That was approved by the NLCSW on May 5th of 2016. And the adoption of these standards was quite exciting, as we were the first jurisdiction in Canada to have produced standards on cultural competence. And culture in these standards are defined quite broadly and captures ethnicity, race, language, religious status, gender, gender identity, age, ability, spirituality, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic status, for example. And the standards outline best practices in working with diverse culture, raise awareness to some of the ethical considerations, promote continuing education in this area, encourage continued reflection and dialogue, and really promote cultural competence as an essential component of social work practice. So in that document, there are 8 standards. And they include things like social workers seek to understand the values, beliefs, and traditions and historical context of clients and incorporate this knowledge into their work. That social workers demonstrate the use of effective intervention skills when working with clients from diverse cultural backgrounds, etc. The standards do note that cultural competence is an ongoing process of learning, reflection, and professional growth, and the term cultural competence is an umbrella term for the knowledge and skills social workers require in working within the cultural context of clients, and it incorporates cultural sensitivity, awareness, humility, and safety. Other resources to assist social workers include a recent publication of the Ethical Compass, which explores cultural competence, and online CE events such as diversity and inclusion in social work, fostering cultural competence in practice, and Aboriginal social work committing to anti-oppressive practice. And some of those webinars can be found on the NLCSW YouTube channel. So ethical decision-making is a key component of professional social work practice, and every day in our province, countless social workers will be working through the resolution of an ethical dilemma in practice. Some of the questions that we've received as part of the ethical consultation process have included, should social workers disclose personal information about themselves to clients? Should social workers ever hug a client? Should social workers accept clients as friends or contacts on social media sites such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or LinkedIn? How should social workers respond when a client offers them a gift or a complimentary service product? And these are just some of the examples. In resolving these dilemmas, we often consult with our peers or with a manager or supervisor. As we know, when it comes to ethics, the resolution of ethical dilemmas is rarely straightforward. So it's always helpful to take a step back and tease out the ethical issues and considerations. And this is why the NLCSW Ethics Committee took the initiative to develop an ethical decision-making tool that you can use in your practice in working through dilemmas. So this guide, which is grounded in the Code of Ethics and professional literature, is a resource you can use to navigate ethical complexities in practice and make ethical decisions. It captures best practices and presents an ethics-informed process for decision-making, yet it is succinct and user-friendly. This is the perfect desk reference along with your CASW Code of Ethics and Guidelines for Ethical Practice and Standards of Practice. I know I keep them on my desk. In this guide, you will find reference to this Code of Ethics. You'll explore components of ethical decision-making, reflect on ethical theory, examine risk tolerance and how this impacts on practice, consider the importance of critical reflection and professional judgment, and find an ethical decision-making model that you can use in practice. And this model provides a series of questions for consideration when faced with a dilemma. So as you can see from your screen, it does take you through a series of questions where you're asked to reflect on, things such as what's your first instinct for resolving the dilemma, what components of the Code of Ethics are applicable, what components of the Standards of Practice are applicable, through which theoretical lens are you examining the dilemma, are there any agency policies that are applicable, what are might be some legal considerations, some cultural considerations, and I won't read them all out, but it's really a decision-making framework that you can use for analyzing that in practice. And it can be used in consultation with a supervisor, with a manager, or with a colleague as well. And that resource was just updated in this past summer, so you'll find that updated version now on the NLCSW website. So here's the next polling question. Youth age 15 years can provide consent for counseling. Yes, no, or unsure. So we'll just give you a minute again to answer this question. Okay, we're just seeing the results come in there now. I'll just give it a few minutes or a few seconds that people can answer the question. Okay, if we're still answering, we can still see the answers coming in. Okay, so we had about 60% that said no. 20% that said yes, and 20% that were unsure. So the NLCSW developed a resource document for social workers titled Informed Consent with Children and Youth Practice Guidelines for Social Workers. This was published in 2019, and it outlines some of the things social workers should consider when working with children and youth as it relates to informed consent. So social workers consider these issues, use their professional judgment, and apply this information within the context of their practice and organizational policies. So if you haven't looked at that document and you're unsure when working with children and youth around, consent and confidentiality issues, that would certainly be a great document for you to access, and again, is available on the NLCSW website. Okay, so Practice Matters. Practice Matters was created as an educational tool to highlight and address ethical topics in practice. And it was launched in 2011. And the first one was the ethics of social media. So we were thinking about social media back in 2011 and how social media intersected with social work practice. These practice documents are usually based upon ethical questions or consults that the NLCSW receives at the office or from emerging trends in social work practice. They tend to be about 5 to 7 pages in length, and social work staff at the NLCSW rotate the writing of these publications. To date, 19 Practice Matters documents have been published, and the topics have included electronic social work practice, accountability in professional practice, termination of the social worker-client relationship, informed consent, conflicts of interest, documentation, self-disclosure, and e-professionalism are just some of the examples. And if there's ever a topic that you would like to see addressed in Practice Matters, please feel free to contact the NLCSW office. This is an ethical resource that was developed by the Ethics Committee of the NLCSW and is intended as a resource for members. And again, the issues have been, identified by social workers as part of the ethical consultation process. And this is a relatively new publication. We look at producing, 3 to 4 a year. To date, we've produced 11 of the Ethical Compass. And these tend to be much shorter than the Practice Matters. They tend to be no longer than 2 pages. So it was a quick reference in terms of what some of the issues, quick reference to some of the issues that social workers are finding themselves facing in practice. So the last one that just came out in September 2020 looked at the ethics of disclosing client information. And again, that resource is available on the NLASW website under Ethical Compass Practice Resources Ethical Compass. And this is another resource that was developed by our Ethics Committee, and to date we've produced 5 of these. And this is a really neat document because it's only about a half a page, but it offers tips around documentation tips for social workers. And we've covered some areas with regards to the 5 that we've produced in terms of things to consider around the documentation of informed consent. This latest one that just came out in September looked at, how do I know if I'm recording too much or too little? Another one looked at, what do I do if a client asks me not to record something in their file? So it's just some documentation tips that we've pulled together from best practices, and again are grounded in the Code of Ethics and Standards of Practice as well. And that resource is available on the NLCSW website. So as you can see, NLCSW has a wealth of information from standards of practice to social policy resources to ethical resources, promotional resources. So really, the NLCSW website is a great website for you to continue to go to and access information. And like I said at the beginning, any new practice resources that are produced, it is included in the update that goes out every month. So again, as Adrian noted, keep your email addresses up to date because that's how you're going to receive notification. Otherwise, you can always go into the website because as resources are produced, they do go up on the website. And like I said, if there's ever a topic or an ethical issue that you'd like to see discussed in a practice resource, by all means, get in touch. And you never know where that's going to lead. It could lead to a document, or it could lead to, some great ethical discussions as well. So on that note, I will pass it back to Adrian.
Okay, thank you, Annette. So just to summarize, as we said throughout, it's very important to stay connected and stay involved. We do have a lot of our regular communication by email, so we generally recommend that you would have your personal email as opposed to your work because the work one may change. And you can update your contact information throughout the registration year by using the online mynlsw.ca portal. We do also encourage you to follow us on Twitter. So if you were following us before the name change, then you just automatically transferred over. But if you're a new follower, our Twitter handle is NLCSWCA. So I'm not sure if we have any questions. We're just going to take a moment and see there now.
Haven't seen any questions yet there, Adrian. I'm just trying to pull that up there. No, I'm not seeing any questions come in there yet. So if people do have questions, please feel free to send them along in the next minute or so.
And you can always follow up with us individually here at the office as well, and we'll certainly get back to you.
Okay. I'm not seeing any questions come in there right now, Adrienne.
Okay.
So hopefully we've answered everyone's questions that they had.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Well, we would just like to say thank you very much for joining us today. And like I said, if you do, have any questions once.
Oh, we did have a question come in, actually. So that's great. We can take that time maybe, where we do have a few minutes.
Okay.
So someone's asking about if they're reading through the documents and resources through the NLCSW website, would that count as any Cpe hours, for example, electives?
Yes, that would count under electives. We do have the self-directed learning category, and you could include those hours under that category.
Okay. And I believe that was the only question we had there. So, like Adrienne said, please feel free to contact the office if you do have any questions. And all the documents that we would have referenced right from the Cpe policy to the practice resources are all available on the NLCSW website as well. So if you can't find the answer there, then, feel free to give us a call.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for attending this afternoon. It's always hard doing a webinar because we can't see the interaction and we can't see the participants. But we did note that we did have people online, and we, as Adrienne said, we do apologize for the late start. We know you're all busy. Technology is great when it works, and when it doesn't work, it can cause some frustration. So thanks for your patience, and thanks for sticking with us, and certainly enjoy the rest of your day.
Yes, thank you.